When most people hear Doc Rivers' name, they think of him coaching. What most may not know was Rivers could hoop and was a rather good NBA player, thriving on the court with his high basketball IQ and level-headedness, helping him dissect the defense and find the open man regularly, often being near the top of the league in assists per game in his prime. Doc Rivers was also a great theft, picking people's pockets and reading passing lanes, becoming a great defender, and similar to the assists, he was regularly one of the best at it in the entire league. Coupled with him being a solid scorer that could go for an outburst because people overplayed his passing, all of which helped Doc Rivers become a top recruit in the country, winning Mr. Basketball USA in high school before joining Marquette, where he'd star for 3 years and played with Team USA, even winning the FIBA World Cup MVP. Then making his way into the NBA, finding his footing in Atlanta with the Hawks, where he put together the best years of his career, being the perfect complementary weapon to Dominque Wilkins, always seeming to set him up in the right place. Going on to lead the Hawks in multiple playoff runs and even made an all-star team, then bouncing around to end his career with the Clippers, Knicks, and Spurs, being a key part of their respective playoff pushes and runs. Before retiring, ending his career after numerous injuries throughout caught up to Rivers in the end. Heading into coaching soon after, where we still find him today coaching the Bucks. This is a look back on Glenn, better known as Doc Rivers' playing career. Glenn Rivers was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, and Rivers would pick up the game of basketball and thrive early on, having the athletic gene like his relatives, as his uncle was Jim Brewer, who was a former NBA player and an all-defensive team member, including his cousin as well, and Byron Irvin, who would later go on to play in the league too. Glenn Rivers went on to attend Proviso East High School in Maywood, Illinois, where he developed into the best high school player in the country, becoming a Parade and McDonald's All-American, then getting selected as Mr. Basketball USA. Rivers was henceforth recruited by lots and ultimately decided to attend Marquette, being the highest-ranked recruit landed at the time for Marquette, becoming convinced by the recruiting pitch from Hank Raymonds and Rick Margeris. Before his freshman season, Glenn Rivers would attend a summer camp at Marquette and wore a Dr. J or Julius Erving t-shirt, earning him the nickname that stuck the rest of his career in Doc from the coaching staff. Doc Rivers' freshman year stepped in to be a starter day one and arguably the team's best player, becoming second on the team in scoring, steals, and assists, averaging 14 points, 2 steals, and 3.6 assists, while also setting freshman season records at Marquette for field goals made at 182 and field goal percentage at 55.3%. The most memorable moment for Marquette this season would come from Rivers, who would hit a long-distance buzzer beater, upsetting 5th-ranked Notre Dame. By season's end, Doc Rivers had helped Marquette go 20-11, yet they missed the NCAA tournament. Next season, Rivers continued to build off a strong freshman season to become more of a facilitator sophomore year, averaging 14.3 points, 5.9 assists, and 2.2 steals, helping Marquette get over the hump, making the NCAA tournament as the 7th seed after going 23-9. Round 1 against Evansville saw the game remain closer than Marquette had wanted, as Rivers uncharacteristically was turnover prone, giving the ball away 7 times, yet still held on to win 67-62 as he finished the game with 16 points and 5 assists. Round 2, Doc Rivers got back on track against 2-seeded Missouri, being the team's leading scorer with 18 points, keeping Marquette close, yet they did not have a big to match up against Steve Stepanovich, losing 73-69. In the offseason, Doc Rivers would join Team USA to compete at the 1982 FIBA World Championship. Rivers at the World Championship, better known as the World Cup today, became USA's go-to guy, leading the team all the way to the championship game to face the Soviet Union in the middle of the Cold War era. Doc Rivers again would be the go-to guy for Team USA in the finals, having 24 points, but they trailed by 1 late having the ball. Needing a basket in the clutch moment, Team USA went to Doc Rivers again, but this time he would miss the shot, losing the game, seeing Team USA go home with a silver. And despite being on the losing team in the end, Doc Rivers was named the MVP of the tournament. Afterwards, Doc Rivers came back to Marquette for his junior season to lead Marquette in scoring, assists, and steals at 13.2 points, 4.3 assists, and 2.7 steals, guiding Marquette to a 19-10 season, making the NCAA tournament as the 9th seed, getting a round 1 matchup against Dale Ellis in Tennessee, where Ellis would lead the Volunteers to a narrow victory as Rivers struggled shooting from the floor, going 4 for 13 and 2 for 7 from the line, ending with 10 points. Afterwards, Doc Rivers decided his time was up in college, foregoing his senior season, deciding to enter the NBA draft, being considered as a late first-round pick, with teams lacking his level-headedness and basketball IQ, helping him often find the open man for easy baskets and playing passing lanes well for steals. Yet teams were not completely convinced on his ability to score, translating to the NBA, so Rivers ended up falling out of the first round. Doc Rivers was drafted in the 1983 NBA draft with 31st overall pick in the second round to the Atlanta Hawks. Rivers was joining a fringe playoff team in Atlanta led by Dominque Wilkins, Dan Roundfield, Tree Rollins, and Eddie Johnson. Doc Rivers' rookie season would work himself into splitting time starting and coming off the bench with Johnny Davis, with Rivers' first start being his most memorable, going against Julius Erving, for whom he was nicknamed after, with even Erving calling him Doc. Doc Rivers ended up surprising his rookie season, becoming a key role player right away, averaging 9.3 points, 3.9 assists, and 1.6 steals for a Hawks team that went 40-42, squeaking into the playoffs as the 7th seed to get a round 1 matchup against the Milwaukee Bucks, who had Sidney Moncrief, Marcus Johnson, Junior Bridgman, and Bob Lanier. The Bucks took the first 2 games in Milwaukee comfortably before the series flipped in Atlanta, as the Hawks won both of its home games, with Rivers being a key part of the Hawks' narrow win over the Bucks Game 4 as he had a team-high 19 points, creating a winner-go-home Game 5 in Milwaukee, where Doc Rivers continued his strong form from the prior game to go for a team-high 21 points and 6 assists. However, Rivers was the only real bright spot for the Hawks this game, as most of the team went cold from the floor, ending the Hawks losing the game and the series. Doc Rivers stepped up his play in this first playoff experience, averaging 13.6 points, 2.4 steals, and 3.2 assists, convincing the Hawks he was going to be the starting point guard moving forward. So in the offseason, the Hawks traded away Johnny Davis to free up more time for him next season. They also decided to embrace the rebuild further, trading away Dan Roundfield, and lastly added a key piece for the future in the draft, selecting Kevin Willis. Doc Rivers' sophomore season and increased role upped his numbers to 14.1 points, 2.4 steals, and 5.9 assists as he went in for 69 games, missing a couple with injury. Meanwhile, the Hawks were in a rebuilding phase, going 34-48, missing the playoffs. Next season, the Hawks continued to rebuild further, trading away Eddie Johnson, resulting in Doc Rivers filling his role as a facilitator, which he excelled at, even seeing Doc Rivers record a career-high 21 assists in a game against Philadelphia. Doc Rivers ended the regular season averaging 11.5 points, 8.4 assists, and 2.3 steals in only 53 games, again missing some time from injury. Yet the Hawks missing Rivers at times did not keep them down this season as Spud Webb filled in and Wilkins dominated, carrying the team to a 50-32 record, making the playoffs as the 4th seed. Round 1, the Hawks faced the Detroit Pistons with Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, Kelly Tripucka, Joe Dumars, and Vinnie Johnson. The series saw Dominque Wilkins continue his dominance, leading the Hawks to a gentleman's sweep as Doc Rivers aided him as the right-hand man, being a big part of advancing Game 1 as he had 19.6 assists, Game 3 with 20 points and 8 assists, and lastly in the series clincher Game 4, Rivers almost dropped a triple-double, having 14 points, 9 assists, and 13 rebounds, helping get Atlanta into round 2 to face the juggernaut that was the Boston Celtics, starring Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Danny Ainge, Dennis Johnson, Robert Parrish, and Bill Walton. The Hawks, though, would not put up much of a fight, losing in a gentleman's sweep 4-1 as the duo of Bird and McHale picked them apart. Doc Rivers' best game of the series was Game 3 as he had 18 points, 14 assists, 5 steals, and 5 rebounds. Rivers altogether had put together a strong playoffs, aiding Wilkins getting the Hawks into round 2 as he averaged 12.7 points, 2 steals, 8.7 assists, and 4.7 rebounds over the postseason. Next season, Doc Rivers continued his strong form, becoming one of the best passers in the league at 10 assists per game while averaging 12.8 points, 2.1 steals, and 3.6 rebounds. The season also saw Rivers finish 8th in Defensive Player of the Year, yet did not make an all-defensive team. All the while, the Hawks continued to improve with a healthy year from Doc Rivers and Kevin Willis improving to aid Wilkins, ending the season going 57-25, earning a 2 seed. Round 1, the Hawks met a well-balanced Indiana Pacers team led by Chuck Person. Similar to last postseason, Dominque got the Hawks off and rolling round 1 with a gentleman's sweep. All the while, Rivers battled an ankle injury this series, even having to miss one game, yet quickly began playing again, with his best game of the series being in the clincher Game 4, as he had 9 points, 15 assists, 3 steals, and 5 rebounds. Round 2, the Atlanta Hawks matched up against the Detroit Pistons again in the playoffs, who had improved since their last playoff matchup, trading Tripucka for Adrian Dantley, as well as adding Dennis Rodman. The series saw several games be close, yet in the end it was lopsided as the Pistons won 4-1, as it was highlighted by the Pistons starting to embrace their physicality, building their reputation as the bad boy Detroit Pistons, as they pushed the Hawks around, frustrating them throughout. Doc Rivers against the Pistons facilitated the ball well, but shot poorly from the floor, being a reason for the quick end to the series. Over the postseason, Rivers had dealt with an ankle injury, dropping his scoring output, averaging 7.8 points to go with 11.3 assists. Doc Rivers would quickly put the rough postseason behind him next year to have a career year averaging 14.2 points, 1.8 steals, 9.3 assists, and 4.6 rebounds, helping get Rivers into the All-Star game and the Hawks back into the playoffs, even as the team took a slight dip this season, going 50-32, getting in as a 4 seed. Round 1, the Hawks met the Milwaukee Bucks in the playoffs again, who are a different team now headed by Terry Cummings, Jack Sigma, Ricky Pierce, Paul Pressey, and Sidney Moncrief. The Hawks would jump out to a 2-0 series lead, winning their home games as Wilkins was killing the Bucks. Yet when the series went to Milwaukee, Wilkins' supporting cast just disappeared outside of Doc Rivers, who improved his numbers in particular in Game 4 as he had 22 points, 9 assists, and 5 rebounds. However, the duo of Sigma and Cummings took advantage of the poor play, tying the series up, forcing Game 5. Which was back in Atlanta, where Dominque continued his strong form and the Bucks went cold when it mattered most, getting sent home. With Rivers playing his part, aiding Wilkins with an extremely well-rounded game, having 14 points, 15 assists, 7 rebounds, and 4 steals. Round 2 brought the Boston Celtics, who had handled the Hawks last go-around, yet found themselves in a series this time, splitting the first 4 games as the Celtics won the first 2 at home, and the Hawks responded, winning 2 of their own home games. The series was tied up after Game 4, thanks to a big performance from Doc Rivers, who had 14 points and 22 assists, falling 1 short of the playoff record. Game 5 was to be back in Boston, and most expected the Celtics to pick back up their winning ways, looking the part through 3 quarters, before an outburst in the 4th put the Hawks over the top thanks to his trio of Wilkins, Willis, and Rivers, defeating the Celtics for a 3rd straight game in a row, needing one more win headed back home in a game that saw Rivers have 21 points and 7 assists. Game 6, Doc Rivers putting his best effort forth to upset the Celtics, scoring 32 points. Yet the Hawks found themselves down late by 2 after finding themselves counter-punching the entire game as they were playing against the Celtics team who was playing a very well-rounded style of ball, versus the Hawks, who was running everything through the duo of Rivers and Wilkins. However, that duo still had a chance at the end to tie it up. Rivers was to inbound the ball to Wilkins, yet he was hounded defensively, seeing the ball go to Cliff Livingston, instead, who missed the shot, ending the game, tying the series up. And to this day, Wilkins is still upset he did not get the ball in this situation, with Rivers agreeing with him as it was a poor decision by him. Game 7 was back in Boston, and the game picked up where the prior one left off, seeing it go back and forth. Doc Rivers had another strong game with 16 points and 18 assists, aiding Wilkins, as Dominque Wilkins and Larry Bird found themselves in an all-out duel in the 4th quarter, seeming to make everything one-upping each other. The Hawks, though, found themselves in a 3-point hole at the end, resulting in an intentional foul on Wilkins, forcing him to miss the second free throw of the 2 free throws for a putback attempt with 1 second left. However, the Celtics corralled the ball and sent the Hawks home packing 4-3. Doc Rivers had almost helped the Hawks reach the conference finals for the first time in a while, being Wilkins' right-hand man throughout the entire playoff run, averaging 15.7 points, 9.6 assists, 2.1 steals, and 4.9 rebounds. Being 1 game short of the conference finals, the Hawks made 2 large offseason additions to aid in a hopeful push into becoming a championship contender, adding Moses Malone and Reggie Theus, which ended up being rather important to remain competitive as Kevin Willis picked up an injury, causing him to miss the whole season. Doc Rivers, with the team changes, saw himself having the ball in his hands less, dropping his averages to 13.6 points, 6.9 assists, 3.8 rebounds, and 2.4 steals. The offseason moves from Malone and Theus had kept the Hawks in the same place after missing Willis, going 52-30, getting another 4 seed, finding themselves with deja vu as its opponent was going to be the Milwaukee Bucks round 1 again. The Hawks took Game 1 with Rivers doing what he does best, having 15 points, 10 assists, and 4 steals. In a game that saw Pierce struggle shooting from the floor, but he would bounce back Game 2, helping the Bucks tie the series up. Ricky Pierce only elevated his play further Game 3, leading the Bucks to another victory, making the Hawks' chances of advancing looking slim heading to Milwaukee for Game 4. However, early into Game 4, Tyrese Cummings would go down with an injury, having to miss the rest of the series, resulting in a Hawks win and the series headed to Atlanta for a decisive Game 5. The series momentum had been flipped just like that as the Bucks' best player was out. Then the Bucks would shock the Hawks in Game 5, behind Ricky Pierce getting hot again, ending the Hawks' season in a disappointment. Against the Bucks, Doc Rivers had played very similar to the regular season, averaging 13.4 points, 6.8 assists, and 4.8 rebounds. In the offseason, Atlanta would lose Reggie Theus in the expansion draft to Orlando. Fortunately, Kevin Willis returned back to form next season to fill the hole. Doc Rivers this season was back at it again, averaging 12.5 points, 2.4 steals, 5.5 assists, and 4.2 rebounds. However, he could only go for 48 games thanks to an injury he picked up, resulting in the Hawks really missing his presence on the court, slipping to a 41-41 record, missing the playoffs. However, it was not all bad, seeing Rivers miss time as he shifted his focus off court, putting a large effort forth working within the community, ending in him being recognized with the J. Walter Kennedy Citizenship Award. Next season, Rivers returned, hoping to spark a bounce-back season, scoring a career-high 15.2 points per game to go with his normal outputs of 4.3 assists and 1.9 steals, helping Atlanta somewhat bounce back, yet not as much as they had hoped, with Malone showing signs of aging, ending in the Hawks going 43-39, making the playoffs the 6th seed to face the bad boy Detroit Pistons, who were largely the same team as their last playoff matchup, just now they had championship success behind them. The Hawks and the Pistons picked up where they left off, with hard fouls and physical plays. In the first 3 games saw Wilkins and DeMars go back and forth, seeing the Pistons up 2-1. Atlanta needing a win to extend the series Game 4 saw Doc Rivers come through with a game-high 34 points, pushing the series to go to a Game 5, which unfortunately ended in a blowout for the Pistons, winning 113-81, ending the Hawks season round 1. Doc Rivers had put together a solid series against the Pistons despite the defeat, averaging 15.6 points, 3 assists, and 4 rebounds. After seeing the team in decline the past couple of seasons, the Hawks decided to go in a new direction, trading away Doc Rivers. Rivers was leaving the Hawks as their all-time leader in assists at 3,866, which still stands today. Doc Rivers was traded by the Atlanta Hawks to the Los Angeles Clippers for 3 future picks that became Stacey Augmon, Rich Manning, and Galen Nickerson. Rivers was joining a Clippers team that had gone through multiple losing seasons, starting to look like it might break through behind Ron Harper, Danny Manning, and Charles Smith. Doc Rivers would become the starting point guard, yet did not find the ball in his hands as much as he did in Atlanta, with Harper also playing like a point guard at the shooting guard position, seeing Rivers average 10.9 points, 1.9 steals, and 3.9 assists. However, the injury problems popped up again, suiting up for only 59 games. Yet it was enough as the addition of Rivers and the continued growth of its core saw the Clippers make the playoffs for the first time since the team had left Buffalo and were named the Braves, going 45-37, getting in as a 7th seed to face the Utah Jazz round 1 with Karl Malone, John Stockton, and Jeff Malone. Rivers would have his best game of the series, Game 1, going for 23 points and 5 assists. It was not enough, though, to combat the freight train that was Karl Malone, who helped the Jazz take both Game 1 and 2. The series headed to LA for Games 3 and 4 and saw the Clippers change the series course, winning both of their games, sparked by their home crowd tying the series up 2-2 with Ron Harper elevating the team, creating a winner-go-home Game 5 in Utah, where the Clippers would finally slow down Karl Malone somewhat, but it was not enough as Jeff Malone got hot, knocking the Clippers out round 1. Doc Rivers against the Jazz had elevated his form from the regular season to average 15.2 points, 4.2 assists, and 3.8 rebounds. In the offseason, Doc Rivers found himself on the move again as a part of a three-team trade that was highlighted by him and Charles Smith being sent to the New York Knicks for Mark Jackson. Rivers was joining a Knicks team looking to compete for a title with the core of Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Anthony Mason, and Charles Oakley. Rivers would split time starting and coming off the bench to average 7.8 points and 5.3 assists, being a role player for a Knicks team that was playing well, going 60-22, making the playoffs as the 1 seed. Round 1, the Knicks played the Indiana Pacers, who had Reggie Miller, Detlef Schrempf, Rick Smits, and Dale Davis. The series was a physical battle, helping set the tone for a future rivalry, as each team picked up hard fouls and technicals throughout. But the outside of Game 3, it was all New York, who were a deeper team, winning the series 3-1, with Rivers' best game being the closeout game, Game 4, recording 21 points and 11 assists. Round 2, the Knicks got a series with the Charlotte Hornets, who were headed by Larry Johnson, Alonzo Mourning, Muggsy Boggs, and Kendall Gill. The series would have several close games, yet when it mattered most down the stretch, Ewing came through time and time again, defeating the Hornets quickly 4-1, helping the Knicks reach the conference finals to play the Chicago Bulls, who starred Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Horace Grant. The series started off showing the importance of home court advantage, being knotted up after 4 games, with Rivers' best game of the series being Game 2 with 21 points. Game 5 was in New York, with the Knicks still controlling home court advantage. The Bulls and Knicks found themselves in a close one late, seeing Chicago lead late by 1. The Knicks had a chance to respond at the very end, giving the ball to Patrick Ewing, who would fall in the clutch moment, handing the ball to Charles Smith, who would have a chance to win the game, but Smith failed to convert on multiple attempts, ending in a Knicks loss. The following game saw the Bulls win at home, seeing Charles Smith become a scapegoat for the Knicks season. Doc Rivers, over the postseason run to the conference finals, played his role well and bumped up his numbers to average 10.2 points, 1.9 steals, and 5.7 assists. Next season, Doc Rivers had hoped to aid the Knicks in another playoff run, yet 19 games in, he injured his ACL, ending his season, averaging 7.5 points and 5.3 assists over the 19 games. From the sideline, Doc Rivers had to watch the Knicks make it all the way to the NBA Finals before losing in Game 7 to the Houston Rockets, becoming a what-if that still keeps Doc Rivers up at night, wondering if him being healthy would have made the difference. Next season, Doc Rivers returned to the Knicks in a reduced role, having been replaced by Derek Harper and Greg Anthony, so after playing in 3 games, Doc Rivers was released. Doc Rivers became a free agent and would sign on with the San Antonio Spurs. Rivers had joined on to the Spurs to help their push in becoming a championship contender behind David Robinson, Avery Johnson, Dennis Rodman, and Sean Elliott. Doc Rivers stepped into the backup point guard role to average 5.1 points, 2.6 assists in 60 games for a Spurs team that was best in the West, going 62-20, entering the playoffs as a 1 seed. Round 1 brought Dikembe Mutombo, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, and the Denver Nuggets. The Spurs, behind David Robinson, quickly showcased why they were the 1 seed, overwhelming the Nuggets, sweeping them out of the playoffs. Rivers' best game against the Nuggets was Game 2, as he had 11 points, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds. Next round, the Spurs matched up with the Los Angeles Lakers, who featured Vlade Divac, Nick Van Exel, Cedric Ceballos, Eldon Campbell, and Eddie Jones. The Spurs again jumped out to a quick start, going up 3-1 thanks to Robinson's superstar form. Game 5 saw the Lakers extend the series after Nick Van Exel stepped up in the clutch, sending it to overtime and winning it in overtime on a game winner. However, the following game, the Spurs got right back on track, defeating the Lakers, getting into the Western Conference Finals to face the Houston Rockets with Akeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. Olajuwon entered the series with a chip on his shoulder, thinking he should have gotten the MVP and not David Robinson. The two battled Game 1, creating a tight contest before the Rockets hit a late jumper from Robert Horry, and David Robinson failed to match it at the buzzer, giving the Rockets the win by 1. The following game, the Rockets rode the momentum from their first game to go up 2-0, winning both games in San Antonio, behind another big game from Akeem Olajuwon, in a game that saw Doc Rivers have his best of the series, scoring 16 points. Many anticipated the series to be all but over, heading to Houston. However, the Spurs got it going, still seeing Olajuwon dominate, but slowed down the supporting cast, tying the series up at 2-2. Game 5, Hakeem Olajuwon went for his third game of having 40-plus points this series, yet this time he was aided by Sam Cassell, helping the Rockets take another game in San Antonio. The following game, Olajuwon continued to get the best of Robinson, showcasing that he was the best player in the league at the time, winning the game and the series for the Rockets after a miss at the end from Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers, over the playoff run to the conference finals, took on a larger role as the team's sixth man to average 7.8 points and 1.6 assists. Rivers signed back with the San Antonio Spurs in the offseason in hopes of making another deep playoff run, who had maintained the same core outside of trading away Dennis Rodman, who was proving to be causing some off-the-court issues. Doc Rivers would play a similar role off the bench to last, averaging 4 points and 1.6 assists, helping the Spurs remain near the top of the West, going 59-23, getting a 2 seed. Round 1, the Spurs played the Phoenix Suns, who had Charles Barkley, Michael Finley, and Kevin Johnson. The Spurs quickly jumped out to a 2-0 lead thanks to big games from Vinny Del Negro and David Robinson. However, back problems arose for Doc Rivers, ending his postseason after 2 games. From the sidelines, Rivers watched the Spurs drop a close one Game 3 before handing it to the Suns Game 4 to advance to Round 2, where Rivers got to watch the Utah Jazz knock out the Spurs in 6 games, ending in Doc Rivers' postseason being cut short, suiting up for 2 games to average 1.5 points. In the offseason, after having numerous injuries throughout his career, Doc Rivers decided to retire after 13 years in the NBA. Rivers ended his career with averages of 10.9 points, 5.7 assists, and 1.8 steals. In retirement, Doc Rivers transitioned into coaching, having an up-and-down coaching career. His first head coaching job was with the Orlando Magic, where he'd helped them overperform and won Coach of the Year, making a couple playoff bursts before getting fired, going on to join the Boston Celtics after, spending some time off broadcasting. In Boston, Rivers found his most success coaching, helping the Celtics win an NBA championship in 2008 and made several deep playoff runs, coaching a pair of All-Star games as well. Then, as the Celtics started to rebuild, he was traded to coach the Los Angeles Clippers and spent time as an executive, helping form the Lob City Clippers, reaching new heights at the time in Clipper history, and even got to coach his son Austin Rivers. However, they never seemed to get it done in the playoffs in the Paul and Griffin era or the Leonard and George era, finding himself out the door going on to coach for the Philadelphia 76ers. We'd helped them have several playoff appearances, coaching another All-Star game before getting fired for not meeting expectations in the postseason, leaving us to where we are at nowadays as he coaches the Milwaukee Bucks with a lot of pressure on him to win now. Most people may remember Doc Rivers as a coach, but he was a player first and foremost that had a lot of success on the court, deriving from his high basketball IQ and level-headedness, helping him dissect the defense and find the open man regularly, often being near the top of the league in assists per game. Doc Rivers was also a great theft, picking people's pockets and reading passing lanes, becoming a great defender, and similar to assists, he was one of the best in the league at it, coupled with him being a solid scorer that could go for an outburst because people overplayed his passing, all of which helped Doc Rivers become a top recruit in the country, winning Mr. Basketball USA in high school, before joining Marquette, where he'd star for 3 years, and with Team USA even winning a FIBA World Cup MVP. Then making the NBA, finding his place in Atlanta with the Hawks, where he put up the best years of his career, being the perfect complementary weapon to Dominque Wilkins, always seeming to set him up in the right place at the right time, guiding the Hawks over multiple playoff series, and even made an all-star team, then bouncing around to end his career with the Clippers, Knicks, and Spurs, being a key part of their respective playoff runs, then retiring, ending his career after numerous injuries throughout caught up to him in the end. Though after his playing career, he may be looked on as a coach now, in my mind I think of Rivers balling out for the Atlanta Hawks. Thanks for watching this video on Doc Rivers' career. If you want to see any other videos about any other random players in the future, leave them in the comments below and I may or may not decide to do them. Who knows? Thanks again for watching. This has been Skid Denver.